Have you ever noticed how your day slips through your fingers without you fully remembering it? You wake up, check your phone, promise yourself you'll just glance at one message, and suddenly your mind is already somewhere else. You eat breakfast while scrolling, you work while half listening to music, you talk to people while thinking about what comes next. By the time the day ends, you feel tired, yet strangely empty, as if you were busy all day but never truly there for any of it. This isn't because you're lazy, undisciplined, or broken. It's because your attention has been slowly trained to scatter. And the most dangerous part is that we've started to believe this scattered state is normal. Modern life constantly pulls your mind away from the present moment. Notifications, tabs, alerts, background noise, endless choices. Each one feels small, harmless, even useful, but together they create a mind that is never fully engaged. You try to focus, and your thoughts jump ahead. You try to relax, and your brain replays unfinished tasks. You try to enjoy something, and a part of you is already thinking about what comes after. This constant mental splitting drains energy in a way that physical work never could. You're not exhausted because you did too much. You're exhausted because you were never whole in anything you did. What makes this even more frustrating is that many people quietly blame themselves. They think something is wrong with them. They assume they lack discipline, motivation, or intelligence. But if you zoom out, you start to see a different picture. Human attention was never designed to handle this level of stimulation. For most of history, the mind focused on what was directly in front of it. Survival demanded presence. You listened carefully, watched closely, reacted fully. Fragmented attention once served a purpose, helping us detect danger in uncertain environments. Today, that same survival mechanism is being hijacked by devices and systems that profit from distraction. Your mind hasn't failed. It's been overloaded. Here's the part few people talk about. Every time your attention breaks, there's a hidden cost. Not just lost time, but lost depth. When you switch tasks, your brain doesn't reset instantly. It lingers. A part of you stays behind with the previous thought, the previous screen, the previous worry. That's why even when you sit down to do something important, it feels harder than it should. Your attention is leaking like water from a cracked container. You pour in effort, but it never fills up completely. Over time, this creates a quiet sense of frustration. You know you're capable of more, but you can't access it consistently. The most subtle damage, though, isn't productivity. It's identity. When your attention is always divided, your sense of self becomes divided too. You start living in anticipation instead of experience. You plan more than you act. You consume more than you create. You imagine versions of yourself instead of becoming one. Life turns into a series of half-felt moments. Meals lose their taste. Conversations lose their depth. Achievements feel strangely hollow. You're present enough to function, but not enough to feel fully alive. What if the problem isn't distraction itself, but the way we relate to it? What if fighting distraction head-on is the wrong approach? Most advice tells you to force focus, push harder, use more willpower. But willpower is fragile. It breaks under stress. It fades when motivation drops. And when it fails, you blame yourself again. This creates a loop: distraction, guilt, effort, burnout, distraction. The cycle repeats, quietly shaping your life. Now imagine a different approach. Imagine attention not as something you wrestle with, but something you train gently, consistently, patiently. Imagine focus not as a rigid state, but as a form of presence you return to again and again without judgment. This idea isn't new. In fact, it's ancient. Long before smartphones, long before productivity systems, there was a simple principle practiced in Japanese Zen traditions. A principle so straightforward that it almost sounds too easy. Yet when applied seriously, it changes how the mind works at its core. This principle teaches that the mind suffers not because it does too little, but because it does too much at once. That clarity doesn't come from speed, but from depth. That peace isn't found by escaping the moment, but by entering it fully. It suggests that when you give your complete attention to one action, something remarkable happens. The noise quiets. The sense of struggle softens. Time changes its texture. You stop feeling pulled in 10 directions and start feeling grounded, stable, whole. At first, this sounds abstract, almost poetic, but there's a reason this idea has survived for centuries. It works at the level where habits are formed and identities shift. It doesn't ask you to eliminate technology or escape modern life. It asks you to change how you show up to what you're already doing. One action, one moment, full attention. Not perfectly, not forever, but sincerely. Before explaining how this works, it's important to notice something within yourself. Right now, as you're reading or listening, is your mind fully here? Or is a part of it already drifting, thinking about something else you need to do, something you want to check, something you're waiting for? There's no need to judge that, just notice it. That gentle noticing is where everything begins, because the goal isn't to eliminate wandering thoughts. The goal is to stop being carried away by them. We live in a culture that praises multitasking, but rarely questions its cost. Doing many things at once feels efficient, even impressive. But efficiency without presence creates a shallow life. You move fast, yet feel behind. You accomplish more, yet enjoy less. The ancient Japanese understood something we've forgotten. Depth creates speed later, but speed without depth creates emptiness. When you train yourself to be fully present in one thing, everything else becomes clearer. Decisions sharpen, learning accelerates. Work becomes meaningful instead of draining. This is where the real shift begins, not with a technique, but with a realization. Your attention is not just a tool, it is your life. Whatever you give it to becomes your experience. If it's constantly split, your life feels fragmented. If it's steady, your life feels grounded. The quality of your attention determines the quality of your days, and the quality of your days determines the quality of your future. In the next part, you'll see how this principle moves from philosophy into lived experience. You'll see how an ordinary person, not unusually gifted or disciplined, learned to apply this way of focusing and transformed not just how they worked, but who they became. And as that story unfolds, you may start to recognize pieces of yourself in it, because the truth is simple and quietly powerful. You don't need more time. You don't need more motivation. You need to learn how to be fully present in the time you already have.
What most people misunderstand about real transformation is that it doesn't begin with ambition, it begins with exposure. Exposure to discomfort, to inconsistency, to the parts of yourself that fail the moment conditions aren't ideal. This is where the system revealed by Miyamoto Musashi becomes disturbing, because it doesn't ask you to become better. It forces you to confront what makes you unreliable. Musashi never spoke about building strength by stacking habits or collecting techniques. His method was surgical. Identify the dependency, remove it. Identify the reaction, neutralize it. Identify the weakness, starve it until it dies. The modern man introduced earlier began to see this pattern clearly once he stopped searching for motivation and started observing his behavior honestly. He noticed something uncomfortable. Almost every productive action in his life required a condition. He worked best when he felt inspired. He trained only when he had time. He spoke confidently only when he felt safe. None of this was accidental. His entire life had been designed to protect him from discomfort, and that protection was exactly what made him weak. The first principle he encountered was elimination of dependency. Musashi warned against reliance on any single weapon, method, or condition, not because specialization is bad, but because dependence creates fragility. If your strength requires something external to function, then that external thing owns you. This idea alone shattered the man's self-image. He realized how much of his discipline depended on mood, environment, and approval, so he made a simple decision that felt almost insulting in its simplicity. One physical action, every day, no equipment, no schedule, no excuse. He chose push-ups, not because they were optimal, but because they were unavoidable. The floor was always there. His body was always there. There was nowhere to hide. The rule was brutal but clean. Do them anytime, anywhere, any condition, even sick, even tired, even busy, especially then. The number didn't matter as much as the rule. Never zero. This was the first crack in the old system, because for the first time, action was no longer negotiated. The body responded faster than expected, but the mind resisted immediately. On the days when energy was low, the excuses became louder. This is where most people quit, convinced something is wrong. But Musashi's system predicts this perfectly. Resistance isn't a sign of failure, it's a sign that a dependency is being removed. When the man did 5 push-ups on his worst day instead of 20 on his best, something shifted. He had proven something critical. His behavior no longer depended on how he felt. That realization led to the second layer, emotional non-reactivity. Physical discipline exposed how reactive his mind really was. Stress at work, tension at home, minor frustrations, all of it triggered automatic responses, defensiveness, avoidance, anger, anxiety. Musashi wrote extensively about maintaining the same mind in battle as in ordinary life. Calm when drinking tea, calm when facing death. Not because fear disappears, but because reaction does. The man began practicing this in moments that felt insignificant but weren't. Traffic, criticism, awkward silence. Instead of fixing the feeling, he observed it. Heart rate rising, jaw tightening, breath shortening, no judgment, no story, just sensation. This was harder than the push-ups. The body wanted action, the mind wanted escape, but he stayed. And something unexpected happened. The sensations peaked and then faded on their own. This is the point where the nervous system begins to change. When fear is observed without reaction, it loses its authority. It becomes information instead of a command. Over time, the threshold shifts. What once caused panic now caused recognition. What once caused paralysis now caused focus. This wasn't philosophy, it was training. Repetition under pressure. Just like Musashi trained with different weapons to remove reliance, the man trained with different emotional states to remove reactivity. But Musashi never separated mind from body. Calm without capability is delusion. The third layer of the system addressed this directly. Progressive physical overload, not for aesthetics, not for validation, but for proof. proof that the body could endure more than the mind believed. The man set a target that felt unreasonable. 100 push-ups a day, every day, no exceptions, and not to show off. To confront the internal voice that said, "This is too much." The first days were humiliating, long breaks, shaking arms, time stretching endlessly. But something important was happening beneath the surface. The body was adapting, but more importantly, the mind was being retrained. The task no longer triggered negotiation, it triggered execution. By the third week, what once felt impossible felt inevitable. And inevitability is the foundation of confidence. Not confidence as a feeling, but confidence as a state of being. As the body hardened, the mind stabilized. Stressful situations no longer caused collapse. Difficult conversations no longer required rehearsal. The man wasn't braver, he was less fragile. This distinction matters. Courage still depends on fear. Stability does not. Musashi's writings point to this repeatedly. Victory comes not from aggression, but from absence of weakness. You don't need to overpower life if there is nothing in you for life to exploit. The next principle emerged naturally: continuity of awareness. Most people relax the moment effort ends. They finish the task and disconnect. Musashi warned against this. Awareness must remain after the action. Not tension, but presence. The man practiced this in small ways. Standing still after training, sitting quietly after conflict. Letting the nervous system settle without distraction. This integrated the lessons instead of discarding them. As weeks passed, something subtle but profound changed. He stopped identifying as someone who was trying to be disciplined. He no longer counted streaks or milestones, he simply acted. Training happened, observation happened, awareness remained. The system was no longer something he followed, it was something he lived inside. This is where Musashi's system becomes irreversible. When behavior no longer depends on motivation, relapse loses its power. Then came the test that reveals whether the system is real. External shock, unexpected pressure, loss. When the moment arrived, the reaction was almost disappointing in its simplicity. There was information, there was sensation, and then there was action. No spiral, no collapse, no drama. There is a moment in every real transformation that feels strangely anticlimactic. No celebration, no applause, no dramatic sense of arrival. Just a quiet realization that something fundamental has shifted. The man who once struggled to hold himself together no longer feels the need to prove anything. He doesn't announce his discipline. He doesn't explain his calm. He doesn't seek reassurance that he's on the right path. And that is when the social consequences begin. People start reacting differently, not because he has become arrogant or distant, but because his presence removes the comfortable illusions they rely on to excuse their own weakness. This is the phase most people are never warned about. Strength, when it becomes identity, stops being inspirational. It becomes confrontational. Friends who once bonded over complaints grow silent around him. Colleagues stop venting, then stop confiding, then keep their distance. Even loved ones begin to say subtle things. You're too serious, you've changed, you need to relax. What they're really responding to is not his behavior, but the absence of excuses in his presence. When someone no longer negotiates with themselves, it exposes how often everyone else does. This is why Miyamoto Musashi warned that the final stages of mastery are lonely. Not because others abandon you intentionally, but because your way of being no longer reinforces their stories. Musashi lived simply, almost invisibly, despite his unmatched record. He did not collect titles or followers. He reduced his life instead of expanding it. Less attachment, less identity, less noise, until only the essential remained. The man began to understand this when he noticed something unsettling inside himself, the fear of losing what he had built. At first, discipline had felt empowering, but now there was a quiet anxiety underneath it. What if I stop? What if I slip? What if all of this disappears? This fear was subtle but dangerous, because it meant his strength was still something he possessed, not something he was. And anything you possess can be taken away. This is where most self-improvement systems fail. They create strong habits but fragile identities. The man realized that if his calm depended on streaks, routines, or external structure, then his strength was conditional. Musashi's final teaching addressed this directly. Let go of the self, not in a poetic sense, but in a practical one. Stop identifying with outcomes. Stop measuring yourself. Stop performing your discipline. Continue the practice, but remove the observer who wants credit for it. So he stopped counting, stopped tracking progress, stopped talking about his training, stopped framing his life as a transformation story. The actions remained, the awareness remained, the physical effort remained, but the narrative dissolved. He wasn't improving anymore. He was simply living according to what was necessary. And something unexpected happened. The fear vanished. Not because failure was impossible, but because failure no longer defined him. This is one of the most difficult shifts to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. When discipline becomes identity, effort disappears. Not because things are easy, but because resistance has no place to attach. He didn't wake up and decide whether to train. Training happened. He didn't prepare himself mentally for difficult conversations. Presence happened. He didn't force calm under pressure. There was nothing inside him that reacted violently enough to disturb it. This is why people describe this level of strength as inhuman, because it doesn't look like effort from the outside. There is no visible struggle, no emotional volatility, no dramatic highs and lows, just consistency, just reliability, just presence. And in a world addicted to stimulation and expression, that kind of stillness feels threatening. The man noticed another change as well. Life didn't feel lighter, but it felt cleaner. Problems still arose, loss still happened, uncertainty still existed, but there was no excess suffering layered on top, no catastrophizing, no identity crisis. When something ended, it ended. When something needed action, action followed. This is what Musashi meant by having deep roots. The wind doesn't stop. You simply stop being uprooted by it. Over time, even the sense of being strong faded. Strength implies contrast, weakness on one side, power on the other. But here, there was no comparison, there was only function. The same way you don't feel proud of breathing, he didn't feel proud of discipline. It was not a moral achievement, it was a biological and psychological baseline. Remove what interferes, and what remains is stability. This is the point where motivation culture collapses entirely. There is nothing to hype, nothing to sell, nothing to chase, just a way of living that refuses to accommodate weakness. And that is why so few people ever reach this stage, not because it's impossible, but because it offers no validation, no identity badge, no external reward. You don't become admired, you become dependable. You don't become exciting, you become solid. At the end of his life, Musashi wrote that he regretted nothing. That statement is not philosophical bravado, it is the logical outcome of a life with no internal contradiction. Regret comes from knowing you avoided what mattered, from knowing you negotiated when you should have acted, from knowing you chose comfort when you should have chosen capability. A life built on elimination leaves no room for that kind of reflection. The unsettling realization is this: nothing Musashi described is inaccessible. There is no secret technique, no rare temperament, no special genetics. The same body, the same nervous system, the same hours in a day. The only difference is willingness. Willingness to remove instead of add. Willingness to be uncomfortable without explanation. Willingness to let go of the version of yourself that needs permission to act. Most people will never do this. Not because they can't, but because they won't. They will choose comfort, distraction, and justification. They will call it balance, they will call it realism, and they will quietly live beneath their capacity. But if you follow this path, even mentally, you already know something they don't. Strength that scares others is not loud or aggressive. It is silent, it is stable, it is inevitable. The question is no longer what this level of mental and physical strength looks like. You've seen it. You've felt its weight. The real question is whether you are willing to eliminate everything that prevents it from emerging. Because once you do, there is no going back. Not because you are trapped, but because nothing inside you wants to return to weakness ever again.